Hey friends, David Watts. This is a little video comparing not technical lens performance, but just sort of the realities of bokeh among 4 different Fuji lenses. This is something I actually wanted to see for myself, and I thought you all that are Fuji shooters might also like to see this. Now, a couple of caveats. This is not the most demanding sort of bokeh test that you'll ever find, but it can be a little bit realistic. What I'm doing, I took this little clay figurine that we had inside the house and just took it outside and set it here on the railing. Don't tell my wife that I borrowed it, but set it here on the railing and just wanted to see, using it as a bit of an example, how 4 different Fuji lenses compare with their rendering of background, of bokeh. So the 4 lenses are the XF 23mm, the f2.0 lens, the 50mm f2 lens, the 80mm, the new macro, that's an f2.8 lens, and then the 90mm f2 lens. So all nice lenses. Let's see how they do. I like, nice blurry background, and we'll see what we think about this. Now again, not the most demanding test because of this key reason. I've got a lot of distance between this object and the trees in the background. Whenever you're looking for good bokeh or the ability to blur out the background, distance between your subject and the thing that you're going to use as your background is key. The more distance, the more blur. I have a lot of distance. So this is not the most challenging, but maybe it is a little bit realistic. You may be out in a park setting somewhere and you just want to blur out the background so it's not distracting. We'll maybe arrange some other tests that are a little tougher in the future. But anyway, so this first shot is actually just with my iPhone. I have a 6S Plus, so I just wanted you to be able to see kind of the lay of the land as it is as to what we're shooting. Actually, I decided to do something else, and that is before I got the Fuji lenses involved, I moved in as close as I could with my iPhone lens. Now the colors, for whatever reason, kind of got washed out. But I just wanted you to see that even with the iPhone, and this is not the newest ones that do the fancy fake portrait stuff. This is just a straight 6S Plus, none of the fancy portrait mode stuff. Even with that, you start to pick up a blurrier background. I focused here on the nose, the background starts to blur out. So that's just basic physics of light. Nothing fancy going on there. So even with an iPhone, right, you can sometimes get some of this. Now, let's go to the Fuji lenses. And let's see here. And I'll just double check. Yep, this is the 50mm f2. So in all these cases, I tried to keep the framing basically the same, but it's not a scientific experiment. So I just set a focus point and kept the same focus point, didn't move it, and always put the focus point on the nose of this little reindeer, this clay figurine. And that will keep it roughly the same. So this is f2, and you'll be able to see it does a very nice job of rendering that background and just making it non-distracting. You can still tell where the pasture is, the grass. You can still tell where the trees are and the shape of the trees, but it's pretty well, obscured and out of focus. You will notice probably, again, the focus point right here on the nose, that even by the time you get to the eyes, that's a little bit blurry. In fact, let's just zoom in a bit. Here's 100%. So the nose is in focus. We'll let the image finish processing. I'll give it a moment here. It's a little busy. There we go. The nose is pretty well in focus. The eyes are out of focus. Certainly the ears are out of focus. So even the 50mm f2 is a fairly shallow depth of field, which is nice. Creates nice portraits. Let's go to the next lens, and this will be the 23mm f2. So certainly we get a much wider view. We can see much further across the pasture. Less blurring of the background, but still renders it out of focus pretty nicely. You still see the pasture, you still see the shape of the trees, can't see the individual trees. One of the things you will notice though with this 23mm at f2, and I've certainly got the figure off to the side a bit, toward the edge, not dead center in the middle. I wanted you to see kind of using basic rule of thirds type composition. I wanted you to be able to see plenty of background. But the one thing you'll notice besides bokeh is that this lens is just not as good as some of the other lenses. When you're at f2 on the 23 millimeter and you're close, and this is about as close as I could focus, and your subject is a little off to the side, it's just a softer lens, and you can see that even in the nose, even though the focus point was here, just not as sharp. But again, to its credit, even though it's a wider angle lens, you're still getting some out of focus and some fairly shallow depth of field pretty quickly with even this lens. Okay, let's change to another lens. And this will be the 80 millimeter, the f2.8. Now, f2.8 won't give you quite as nice of a background blurring effect, but because we can get fairly close, and in this particular setup, because we had a lot of distance to the background, the background is just completely obliterated. You can't even tell now that there are trees back there. It's just a neutral background. In fact, for a real portrait of this effect, or for a real portrait of this object, I would probably use a smaller aperture because the depth of field is quite small. The nose is in focus, and then boom, it's pretty much gone after that point, and begins to blur rather rapidly. Let's look at another example here. Let's see here. Oh, actually, what I should have explained is on that previous image, that was getting essentially about as close as I could with the macro functionality. This is the image I really wanted you to see. This is attempting to keep the framing that we had before. So let's flip back to the 50 millimeter. So we'll remember 6191, 6180. So we've got roughly the same kind of framing of this little reindeer. And in the 50 millimeter, you can make out the background, but it's not certainly not all that sharp or anything. It's out of focus nicely. Come back to the 80 millimeter, roughly the same framing, but the background is even more obscured. So you would just, you might know that that's some brown pasture. You might know there's some trees there, but pretty well obscured, which is nice. And as people say about the 80 millimeter, really sharp, very sharp sort of lens. Now compare this. Let's go back to the 23 millimeter. And let's go to 100%. So here's 100%. It's possible I might have moved just a little bit, but either way, not as sharp here as what we see right here. All right, so the 80 millimeter is a really sharp lens. Again, the good news is great bokeh in the background, really nice, blurs things out very nicely. One other example, and that's with the 90 millimeter. 90 millimeter lens, this is f2, and in my opinion, the best of the portrait lenses. Certainly the 56 millimeter 1.2 would be another candidate, but my opinion, this is the best. The background is really nicely rendered, very smooth, very washed, just sort of washed away, no details, nothing you can really make of it. Really good clarity here, and it's even possible I might have missed the focus just a bit as I look at it closer, but either way, you can tell it's a nice sharp lens, great picture qualities, the ribbon is beautiful, everything is just very nice, and the 90 is super hard to beat. But the key point is, and this is where I love the 90 for portraits, but I like taking portraits in low light conditions. So the 90 has no image stabilization, makes it tough. 90 millimeter, you probably need a shutter speed of about 1/150th, most of us anyway. Maybe 1/120th or so, 1/100th of a second, but 1/150th is probably better to keep from showing any movement. And your ISO is really going to be cranked pretty high at that point. So the 80 millimeter, although the bokeh is not quite as perfect, it's not quite as buttery smooth, it gets the job done very nicely because it does have the optical image stabilization. Let's just do one more flip back and forth. So again, here's the 90 millimeter. Here is the 80 millimeter. So now this, again, not the most demanding bokeh test. We'll set up another test and show you maybe some more limitations. But for kind of real world portraits of people, if you could kind of substitute this, as a picture of a person, and you're in a park setting and you just want the background to blur away, you're going to get great results from the 80. You'll get great results from the 90. You'll even get some really nice results from the 50 millimeter f2.0. Sometimes we prefer to see a little more of the background. It just gives us a little more sense of context, what's there. So anyway, just wanted to offer that to you, and hopefully that'll help you a little bit as you think about the Fuji lenses, as you think about background and bokeh and the blur and what you get. Even I guess one of my key points being, even on the iPhone, if you get close enough to your subject and you've got enough space behind the subject, you can get a little bit of blur. Show you that one more time. It's not exactly pleasing or super desirable, but you get a little bit. Again, the 50 millimeter we did well. Even on the 23 millimeter, if I can get back to it properly. Let's see here if I can find my 23 millimeter again. It should be right here. Oh, I'm zoomed in 100%. Even the 23 millimeter, we get some nice blur in the background. Not as good as the 50, certainly not like the 80 or 90, but we get some, which is pretty good for a wide-angle lens. But the lens is a bit softer, as we mentioned earlier. So hope that helps you a little bit. 23 millimeter, 50, 80, and 90, and that will give you a sense of things. That's it. If you like the video, please give us a subscribe. That helps us a lot. And thumbs up is good too. Tell a few friends. Share the video with some other people. Hope this will help. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.